गवर्नमेंट प्रोडक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट्स कर रहा है कि नहीं कर रहा है, और हमारा एक्सपोर्ट इंपोर्ट का क्या सिनेरियो है. Let's check the country today. What is the consumption scenario? Now the retail consumption is always dependent on the interest rate in our country, correct? मतलब आप हाउसिंग लोन लोगे, गाड़ी लोन लोगे, कब लोगे? जब इंटरेस्ट रेट कम होगा. When interest rate is high, you will not take loans. Overall, the scenario in our country now is people are talking about lower interest rate scenarios, right? Already, if you read the newspaper, you know the State Bank of India have reduced the interest rate on fixed deposits. So that is the precursor of decreasing interest rate. And why will interest rate fall? Because RBI will take an action to reduce the interest rate. And why will RBI reduce the interest rate? It will look at various macroeconomic factors like unemployment, inflation, and based on those factors, it will try to make a judgment कि अभी interest rate कम होना चाहिए या interest rate बढ़ना चाहिए. Right? Are you with me? Great, fantastic. So our consumption scenario is okay. You think consumption scenario in India का भी better हुआ है? If you don't think, just go to any mall. Just see how people are thinking about buying. If you don't believe that consumption scenario has improved, look at the consumption behavior in e-commerce these days. So it has definitely improved. Long way to go, but still improved. Investment scenario. Has the investment scenario in our country improved? Yes, it has. A lot of investors outside now have received confidence from this new government. And what kind of confidence it is? It is a confidence that unnecessary taxes will not be imposed at a retrospective level. The new government is very proactive in welcoming the new investors. The environment is positive. Government expenditures, you can see in the 100 days of working, new government is very, very serious about where they are spending money. If you observe this budget, okay, you want me to hide the chat box? Okay, Gatak. Okay, I'll remove this as well. Sure. Okay, so I was talking about the government expenditure. If you observe this year's budget, what was expected from Mr. Arun Jaitley? That he will go ahead and do some big ticket reform announcements? No, it was not expected. People knew that this budget is going to be more of a consolidation budget, a warm-up budget, where he would try to understand the overall economic scenario, and in next budget probably he'll try to become more aggressive in terms of reform measures is concerned. Now what did he do? Agar if you observe it properly, he gave small amount to lot of new schemes. 100 crores, 100 crores, 100 crores, 100 crores. You remember he gave 100 crores for a bullet train feasibility study between Ahmedabad and Delhi. How many people remember that? How many people have really seen the budget and tried to understood what he has done? So he has given 100 crores for small things. You know, there's such a fantastic logic for that. The logic is, I will spend first 100 crores. I will not allow leakages of money out of that 100 crores. Even if there is leakages of money, it will not exceed 100 crores. And first I will evaluate whether that proposal, whether that expenditure or whether that project is feasible or not. And if it is, then I will allocate 10,000 crores for the bullet train. That is the policy. That is the way it should be. Today, if we want to start in our family, suppose if you want to start anything, you will spend 100 rupees first. एक बार 100 रुपया खर्चा करके देखते हैं. And once you are comfortable that yes, 100 rupees spent किया हुआ worth निकला, this thing has a potential, then you will put 1,000 rupees, right? You will, if the moment you dedicate 1,000 rupees for a particular purpose, there is a chance of leakages because it's a corrupt country anyways. So you think government expenditure scenario has also improved in India? Yes, I think strongly it has. And the last point, the export and import. What is the key catalyst of export and import? I want to answer from you guys. What is the chief catalyst of export and import? What drives the export and import for a country? Are you there with me, guys? Actually, the reason why I wanted to have this chat is, okay, okay. Okay, I'm getting answers here. What drives this? Okay. Let me. Sorry, because I removed this chat piece, I missed a lot of questions. Mr. Ghatak, you have to bear with me. Okay. Jimit, I'm going to come back with your question, but I'm just trying to evaluate the answers given by people. So software. So for any country, what drives the export and import? For India, it is software, crude oil, gold, capital goods. Correct, Jimit? Surya Kumar is saying currency. That's the answer which I'm looking forward to. Currency. So our currency, is it weak? Has it gone weak or strong in last, say, 1 year or 2 years, or rather 2 years? It has gone weak. So from 50, 51, the currency has gone to, it has gone to as high as 65, and now it is trading at around 61 level, isn't it? Is it good for export or bad for export? It's good for export, isn't it? So if you see, our export competitiveness has increased over last 1 year. And this is clearly reflected in a lot of industries. I was studying this industry called dye and pigment industry. You know the dye industry which you make dye for coloring purpose, cloth coloring or leather bags coloring. You know this industry, dye and pigment industries? Because of rupee and because of lot of environmental restrictions in China, our industry has suddenly revived like anything. The earning per share of companies has gone up in 1 quarter by almost 5 times. The stock prices, there are few stocks which have gone up by 3 times or 4 times in the last 2 months. Because as an export oriented industry, we are consumer of dyes because we are paint companies, we have leather manufacturers who use dye for coloring purpose. But it's a majorly export driven sector. It is showing a phenomenal growth. So if you see India GDP overall, all the components are in positive direction. So people are expecting GDP to be 5.5 this year, isn't it? The estimate of BJP is also more than 5.5. It is not a surprise. And it should not be a surprise that market is trading at 8,100, 8,200. Because if GDP is growing aggressively, that means your base for growth is growing. So your performance of your companies will definitely grow. Now you understand, market is not an illogical creature. The only problem with market is it sees 1 year henceforth क्या होने वाला है और उसको आज price करता है. You are getting my point? What will happen in 2015? What is the return expected from companies in 2015, 2016? Market tries to price that today. That's the problem with market, and that's not the problem. That is the I would say that is the philosophy which buyers at this level are adopting. कि ये 1 साल बाद मुझे इतना रिटर्न देगा तो मैं आज ही इसका प्राइस देने के लिए रेडी हूँ. Okay, then an income approach. I follow the approach which we discussed earlier. This is an expenditure approach because in this way you can track each and every component properly. In India, income approach is not the best way to track because in India, incomes are generally, not fairly presented. So I would try to avoid looking at the income approach in my normal analytics. An output approach is that how much as an output GDP is, how much as an output of goods and services we are creating in India. Again, because of lot of taxation issues and double taxations, it becomes very difficult to really count the output oriented GDP growth. So I would try to restrict myself to the expenditure oriented growth and tracking the expenditure oriented growth of our country. Okay, let me just go to a question which was asked by Jimit. So should government encourage domestic consumption more or export more? Jimit, it depends upon your competitive advantage. If we are as a country great in export oriented working, because what does export oriented mean? It needs a strong manufacturing capability if we want to export manufacturing goods. It needs a great service oriented ability if we want to export services. Why India is so strong in IT? Because our core competence is service oriented. We are a service economy. We are not a manufacturing economy now anymore. The component of GDP, almost 50% is service, 25 is manufacturing, 25 is agri. If you see the growth, I think one of the largest component growth in the last 10 years for India has been service growth. So government would definitely like to have a balance of both domestic consumption as well as export. Because if too emphasis is given only on the domestic consumption, then that may lead to demand-led inflation. So a balanced approach has to be there. And obviously by export, you also get foreign exchange reserve, which is a very, very important need, because if you have foreign exchange reserve in our country, if in your country, you will be able to consume, you'll be able to spend for high-end technologies or import for goods which are needed for your consumption. अगर हम लोग export नहीं करेंगे, yeah, I'll do that. Anup, I will do that. Okay, hide the panel, PPT not visible. Okay, I'll do that, dear. My only challenge is that, okay, let me just see if is it fine now? My only challenge is that I'm unable to look at the chat questions actively. We'll work out this solution in our next presentation, but I hope everything is fine now. So, okay, I just missed this point. So I hope I have answered your query, Jimit. So this is typically the growth rate which we saw. It did fell for almost 2 years, and now we have a sign of recovery because of the factors which we have already discussed. Okay, what is deficit? How do you define deficit? I mean, deficit is, again, think from your perspective. What is deficit? Deficit is आमदनी अठन्नी खर्चा रुपया. That is deficit. And obviously you have to borrow to cover up that expenditure, that difference. So there are different forms of deficit at different stage of the balance sheet. Fiscal deficit is government has fiscal revenue. What is fiscal? Taxations. So government has taxation revenues and government has planned as well as unplanned expenditures. If there is any difference in that, government will fill up the difference by borrowing from the market. So is deficit bad? No, not necessarily. Depends upon the stage of economy you are. Since India is a growing nation, I would compare India with a 6-month or 7-month-old child who has just developed a new tooth. The child has become very hungry. He is having a lot of craving for teething. This is India. We need consumption because we need that child, a strong appetite of that child to grow. So there can be fiscal deficit, and that fiscal deficit can be plugged in by borrowing from the government. But once you are a developed nation, your revenue should always be more than your expenditures. That would add to eventually your GDP, right? An aggressive additions to GDP and your good healthy balance sheet. What is revenue deficit? Revenue deficit is again that what kind of revenue you are getting and what is the revenue expenditures. The difference is if there is any more, then you are talking about the revenue deficit. What is current account deficit? Current accounts relate to mostly the export and import. So if your import is more than your export, it is called current account deficit. And capital account deficit is essentially all the expenditures made on the capital account front and all the revenue realized on the capital account front. If there is any difference, it's called capital account deficit. So current account deficit plus capital account deficit will eventually lead to your fiscal deficit, isn't it? Pure maths. Okay. So this is all about GDP. Then let's talk about some more parameters which are important to make judgment about where the economy is going. So again, in the GDP, you have identified parameters like consumption, parameters like investments,